They tried today in Russia, they tried in China, they tried almost everywhere, but they were not successful so far. Elon Musk had the first reusable rocket. In this year, we had almost 100 rocket launches. I talk about 2026, and 55 out of them were SpaceX, the private company from Elon Musk.
The space industry, the space economy already exists. It's not science fiction. Hello and welcome to the IAA's YouTube channel. I'm joined today by Dr. Rainer Zittelmann, a historian, sociologist, prolific author, among many other things, an IAA author as well. But today we're going to talk about his new book, New Space Capitalism. Dr. Zittelmann, I'll start with a very basic question for readers who aren't following the subject, which in this case will probably be the majority. What exactly is the space economy? Are we talking about science fiction here? Are we talking about things that might happen in future decades? Or are we talking about something that is already happening?
First of all, it's reality. Even you don't have to read my book, but please make an experiment. Take your ChatGPT or whatever AI and ask the question, what will happen if all the satellites are cancelled or fell out from one day to the other? I don't want to talk about it. Try it, ask them, and you will see what happens. But if we speak about space flight, it was decades ago government-led. But today, I give you only two numbers to make clear that it's no science fiction, but that space capitalism is reality today. In this year, we had almost 100 rocket launches. I talk about 2026, and 55 out of them were SpaceX, the private company from Elon Musk, and there were 41 from all other countries together, from Europe, Russia, China, Japan, India. So even one single private company conducted more rocket launches this year. And last year it was similar. In total of last year, there were 324 rocket launches, but 165 out of them were SpaceX rocket launches. And then there were other private companies, for example, Rocket Lab. They had 21 launches last year, and then I compare it with Europe. Europe had in total of 8 last year. So it means even this company Rocket Lab, with I think most of the people who listen to us now don't know them, had 3 times more rocket launches than Europe, or only one last number that makes it clear that it's no science fiction, but reality. Today, we have 15,000 active satellites in the orbit, 15,000. But 10,000 out of them are Starlink satellites, also from Elon Musk's company. So 10,000 out of 50,000. So space capitalism is not something for the future. It's reality today. And my book is about 2 things. First, the history. How did it happen? This change, this drift from government-led spaceflight to private. And the other is that we look in the future. What are the things that could happen in the future?
Right. So let's talk about that history for a moment, because I'm guessing most of our listeners, this is the first thing that will come to mind when we hear about space travel. We will think about the moon landing, the Apollo missions, the programs of the 1960s, because this is what has dominated our perceptions of space travel, space exploration for a long time, basically until Elon Musk came along and until the space capitalism, the private space industry that you're talking about, started to develop. But still, our perception of outer space is still shaped by what happened in the 1960s. And this has economic implications. So there's one economist who uses space metaphors a lot, and that is, of course, Mariana Mazzucato, who is the guru of industrial policy. And a lot of politicians nowadays, I don't know whether you follow the British debates here, but there's a lot of politicians here, especially in the Labour Party, who like to talk about moonshot missions. So they're not talking about the actual space economy. They use it as a metaphor for industrial policy of basically any kind. For them, pretty much everything they do is a moonshot mission. So even free breakfast at school, the breakfast clubs, even that is now called a moonshot mission, because this is an investment in the human capital of the future. Now, is it actually true, even if if we want to talk about this metaphor, if we want to take it maybe a bit too literally for a moment, is it actually true that a state-led space exploration, that was a terrific success? Or what is the record of, say, you're talking about space capitalism, but let's also talk about space socialism for a moment, because historically, most of outer space activity has been that.
Sure, the Apollo program was a huge success, but it costs a lot, $300 billion in today's money. 400,000 people worked for the program with 20,000 companies, because it was something like a war. Lyndon B. Johnson, the American president at this time, I have here a quote. He said, "In the eyes of the world, first in space means first, period. Second in space is second in everything. And because of this, they spent all money, all the efforts in the space program." Yes, and finally, I have to admit, it was successful. And it's not that I claim that everything that the government does will always in 100% fail. No, this was successful. But then we have 50 years of failure. And the trick from Mariana Mazzucato is she talks about the 10 successful years, and she doesn't talk about the next 50 years that were a total failure. It's like a gambler. Maybe you say, "Oh, I won here $100," and then he doesn't talk about how he lost 1,000 in his next gambling. And so I talk about also this 50 years after this, and this was especially the Space Shuttle program. So we have to talk a little bit about the Space Shuttle program. This was a total failure. Why? The prediction was, or the forecast was, that it would development cost $5 billion, and for every flight between $5 and $10 million. The reality was that every flight cost between $1 and $1.5 billion. Billion, not 5 to 10 million. And they calculated with 140 flights the year. So you can fool yourself if you assume a large quantity of flights every year. But in reality, it were 135 flights in 30 years. And then they had 2 accidents where all 14 people died, and then the program was canceled. And then the situation in 2011 was, after the Space Shuttle program was canceled, that the Americans had not the possibility to bring their own American astronauts from American soil with American rockets to the International Space Station. They were not able, because the Space Shuttle program was canceled. There was no other rocket, and so they had to rely on old Russian Soyuz rockets, because this was the only possibility to bring their astronauts to the International Space Station. So you see, the headline of this chapter of the book is "The End of the Future," because this was really the end of the future. It was a total disaster. And only then, there were some smart people in NASA, they decided, okay, we should try it maybe with this private companies. Most of the politicians were totally skeptical. No, this will be a disaster. This is an absolute crazy idea. But of course, it was something. They called it the Hail Mary moment, as you have it in football, the last move where everything is almost lost, and then you try something that in most cases is not be successful. But okay, if you lost everything, you can give
you might as well.
Yes, and this was with SpaceX, and there was one woman, especially member of SpaceX in the NASA, and she had to make the contact or the cooperation with SpaceX. And she said every week a couple of people came in my office, "Oh, you're so poor. I'm so sad for you that you have to work with these crazy people." But in the end, what happens? Then 9 years later, in 2020, America was again able to bring their own astronauts from American soil with American rocket to the International Space Station, but this time with a private company, with SpaceX and their Falcon 9 rocket. And it was much cheaper than it was before. I think one number is very impressive. If you compare the launch cost, this is how much does it cost to bring 1 kilogram to space. If you compare this launch cost from the space shuttle and the internal costs of Elon Musk's company SpaceX, he reduced the launch cost by 95%. By 95%. And one reason is because he was the first to produce a real reusable rocket. They tried it a long time before in the United States. They tried today in Russia. They tried in China. They tried almost everywhere, but they were not successful so far. Elon Musk had the first reusable rocket 10 years ago. The second one was a couple of months ago, also a private company, Blue Origin. This is Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder company. But Europe is not able to build it. The United States are not able to build it. Russia is not able. China, they try. And of course, one day they will build it. But Elon Musk was able 10 years ago. And this makes a difference, a huge difference, especially if it comes to the costs. Because imagine you come next time to Berlin, you take this flight, and then the aircraft will be, you can use it only one time, the aircraft. I think that the cost for the ticket would be maybe something like 800,000 euros or something like this. So, and this is how the NASA does it today. We had a couple of months ago the Artemis 2 mission, the flyby to the moon. This cost $4 billion again. So there's not a difference to be found. So you see, this is the huge difference between government-led and I want to maybe add, what is the reason? Why was Musk able to reduce the costs? Even in the old times, in the 60s, in the 70s, the NASA didn't produce their own rockets. They were also produced by private companies like Boeing or Rockwell. But the way how they cooperated was much different. It was a detailed micromanagement by the NASA. You have to do it this way, that way, this way. And even sometimes they told them what employees they had to hire or to fire. So it was in detail. And the craziest thing was something they called the cost plus program. It means the company, for example, Boeing, has to explain their costs. For example, our costs are 1 billion, and then they could add a profit maybe of 8 or 10% because they had fear that they will make too much profit. But the result was exactly the other way around. The incentive was now to increase the costs, because if you have 1 billion costs and you can add 10% and then you get 100 million, or you have 3 billion costs and then you make a profit of 300 million. So I spoke with one of the people who worked at this time in one of the two leading space companies in the United States, and he told me our best product was our overhead. Because increase the costs and you will increase the profit. And this is, of course, very strange. But you know it, I think, better than me as an economist. It's all about the incentives. If you have an incentive to increase costs, costs will increase. And this was the system. And now it's completely different. Musk doesn't sell his rockets to the NASA. He built it in the way he wanted to build it. And these are his rockets. He doesn't sell them to the NASA. What he sells is a service. He's a service provider. You can compare it maybe with FedEx or UPS, you deliver something from A to B, and I charge you this price. So I bring your astronauts to the International Space Station, and I charge you this, and there's so many dollars. Or I bring you this satellite in orbit, and I charge you this. And this is a complete different system, because now, if Musk is able to save costs, his profits will increase. And this is what happened. I think he has a huge profit margin today. I don't know exactly how much, but I told you his internal costs are maybe something like $1,200 per kilogram. Compared with the space shuttle, it was $54,000, but he charges maybe 3 times more because, of course, the price doesn't depend on his internal costs, but on the prices charged by his competition. And so you see, it's you have to understand that the kind of cooperation in the 60s and today is completely different.
Yeah, so this sounds very much like space economics is ultimately not that different from planet Earth economics. The economic rules are the same. It is true, as the Mazzucato Whites say, that sometimes the state can promote what economists call product innovations, coming up with the broad outlines of a new technology, doing something that was just not possible before. So Mazzucato herself talks about this, how the iPhone, the smartphone, how it contains technologies that were developed, among other things, with state support, state programs, state research and development programs. And this may all be true. It's just that what's equally important is what economists call process innovation, which is the kind of innovation which radically brings down costs. So quite often what makes innovation in the marketplace so special is that something that starts out as a luxury good, a luxury technology that only very few, very rich people can afford, becomes a mass market product within a few years. So I remember this happening with DVD players. They were briefly thought of as a luxury good. Laptops were for a while a luxury good, and then a couple of years later, everyone has one. It ceases to be special. From what you're describing, it sounds like Elon Musk has almost achieved something quite like that when it comes to building space rockets. In your book, you also talk about, can we talk about briefly about the politics that got in the way when we talk about the space economy of the 1970s, 80s? You talk about in your book how NASA programs followed political criteria rather than economic criteria. What is that all about? What was the problem there?
Maybe first I want to add something with this example with the iPhone. I know this example, of course. This is totally crazy. It shows that she absolutely does not understand what's the task of an entrepreneur. It would be the same as if I say Picasso did something new. All the colors were already there, red, blue. The only thing, okay, he mixed it in a different way. Yes, it's true. But this is what it's all about, to mix it in a different way. So this is absolutely crazy, her example with the iPhone. So now your question was the influence of the politics.
Yes, so the political criteria, political distortions in the space industry.
Let's go again back to the space shuttle program, because this was the program for the early years, and rational criteria were absolutely not important. When you follow the discussion, I have it in detail in my book with Richard Nixon, who was the president then of the United States, and they discussed 3 years about it. They discussed, for example, about jobs in California. California was the so-called swing state at this time. And then he had fear that before the next elections, there were a lot of people maybe without a job in California. And what can we do? We should do anything to give them jobs. Whatever, it's not so important. This was the first priority. And the other priority was a good friend of Richard Nixon, a personal friend and a donor for his election, was the founder of the company that produced the space shuttle. And so these were the criteria. Of course, we had a discussion before for people who know something about public choice theory, not a surprise at all. But I think this is a very good example that it was in no way based on scientific or technical decisions, but how to win voters were, and these were the priorities. And then after they were successful, they thought, okay, now we can do everything in the same way. And Nixon started something like a big government program against cancer. And he thought, okay, if we could go to the moon, now we can win the fight against cancer, and we do it in the same way. Even he had the idea to rebrand the NASA, to give them a new name, that they don't do only space-related things, but anything else. And of course, this was a total failure. This is, again, if we come back to Mazzucato, where you can't read anything about it with her. It's only to tell about the one success and let away all the failures. And one of these failures was the fight against cancer program that Nixon started after this. So, and I give you a very important principal argument. I spoke about 4 decades of stagnation in manned spaceflight. You see it now, the NASA was very proud to pass by the moon. Oh, we were 6,000 kilometers more in space than we were 54 years ago. But for me, it was really ridiculous. A PR show. Yes, in 1969, you landed on the moon, and now, and the last man who landed on the moon was in 1972. But then 54 years later, you passed by the moon. So you see, this is a total stagnation. Also with the costs are almost the same as they were before. But if you compare the, how do you call it, unmanned space flight, so an unmanned space flight, you have a lot of very successful examples what they did in this decades. But what is the reason? Because politicians were not interested in this at all. With the manned space flight, every president had his own idea. Go to Mars, go to moon, or build the International Space Station, or do whatever. Every new president had some new ideas and to change this. So they were very interested because this is what will be reported in the media. But unmanned spaceflight, they were not interested in all. And this is the reason why it was much more successful. And this is another lesson from that I have in my book. The moment when politicians are not interested in a topic, this is a very important precondition to make something successful. The best example is Obama. Obama was very important for the introduction of private space flight. But what was the reason? Did he believe in capitalism, or was he thrilled by space flight? I don't know. He was neither thrilled by capitalism, not by space flight. He wanted to spend all the money for Obamacare, and he spent 100 times more for social politics than he spent for NASA. And then were some smart people who told him, maybe it's a good idea that private companies will do it. Then we don't, oh, that's good, that sounds good, let's do it, because he was not interested in them. And this was the starting point for private space flight. So as a general lesson, if politicians are not interested in a topic, this is very good. Then you can make great big progress.
So political indifference is good news. This is as good as it gets. They don't need to be passionate believers in capitalism. They just need to stay out of the way. Otherwise, what you're describing here, the 1970s space shuttle, 1980s problems, this sounds, as you said, like very classical public choice problems, that you have dispersed costs. So no individual voter anywhere is going to think, well, my tax bill is going up because of the decisions that Richard Nixon has taken, because of the way he's allocating these jobs. But this is, of course, how politics works. You think in terms of good headlines, jobs for the boys, swing states, or here marginal seats. You want job creation in places that might vote for you, but that you can't take for granted. So we see this in other areas too. This is what happens here. I've seen this when it comes to hospital programs. Hospitals are much less likely to close in a swing seat, in a marginal seat, than they are in a seat which one party takes for granted. And so I guess even somebody who isn't interested in space travel, the space economy as such, can still read those passages of your book as just a very good illustrative example of how public choice economics works, and the problems with Matsukatoism, because yes, this is essentially what she does. She cherry picks the few success stories and disregards the many instances of failure. Now, in her case, she uses space travel, the moonshot mission, more as a metaphor than she's not really talking about literally flying to the moon. But even at the level of the metaphor, it already breaks down, because she looks at the 1960s, the brief period of success, ignoring the many decades of failure. And if you do it in that way, yes, you can come to the conclusion that industrial policy is a brilliant idea, but not if you look at if you do a cost-benefit analysis over a longer period.
She has a chapter in her book, especially about the moon landing. It's not only a metaphor, but she has a chapter about it as an example to prove her thesis. But she lets completely away the next 50 years. And I think this is not serious. To take 10 years that were successful and have not any line, no paragraph about the next 50 years that was a failure. And so I hope that that my book can also support a little bit those economists who criticize her with this special topic.
Right. So Matsukato cherry-picking her examples, that will not be news to our listeners. You said in the beginning that the space industry, the space economy already exists. It's not science fiction. You can write industry reports about it. But there's one sub-activity here which could become a big thing in the future, but isn't yet, and that is asteroid mining. The idea of getting valuable resources, rare earth metals and things like that out of asteroids. So the technology exists to take some samples already. I think that has even been done, but we haven't seen asteroids being treated like, say, an oil field would be on Earth. What would be the situation here if somebody, say Elon Musk, if he came up with some sort of spaceship that can extract resources from asteroids? He can detect it. He can also he figures out how to dig some of it out of an asteroid. What would be the legal situation here? Would he even be allowed to do that? Has anyone ever thought about who owns resources in outer space?
Yes, as for the legal situation, there are two treaties. The one is the so-called Moon Treaty, but we can forget it because it's signed only by about 20 countries, but not one of the important space-faring nations. But then there's another treaty. It's the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. And according to Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty, it's prohibited for countries to claim ownership over celestial bodies or land on celestial bodies. This is crystal clear that it is forbidden. And by the way, I have no problem with this. In a way, I like this idea that it's forbidden for nations to claim ownership. But the problem is that it's not clear how is it about private person and how is it about companies. And there is nothing in this contract, and I think the reason is because in the 60s, no one could imagine that some years later there will be people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos who have the money and the possibility for private space travel, because at this time it didn't exist. So they have nothing in this contract. And there's a discussion amongst space lawyers, and some of them say, okay, what is not forbidden in the first place, it's allowed. And so it's forbidden for countries, for nation states, but it's not forbidden for private companies. But there are others who try to find arguments why it is also forbidden for companies. So the only thing that is real clear that it's not clear. And of course, this is a problem for investors if you have such a situation that is not clear. And And the United States did something in the last years to go in the right direction. There were executive orders first from Obama and then from Donald Trump about space resources. And we have also this Artemis Accords. And according to this, it's allowed to take resources from asteroids as your property, but this doesn't mean that it's allowed to own celestial bodies or to own land on celestial bodies. And in addition to it's not really clear again. So they tried to solve this problem in a way, but I think the most important thing, and this is the central thesis of my book, the conclusion, chapter 10, we will not make real progress without private property in space. And I think it's crystal clear. Socialism failed everywhere on Earth. You wrote a great book, Socialism, the Failed Idea That Never Dies. I can recommend it for everyone. It's a great book written by you. So it failed everywhere, and when it failed everywhere, why should it be successful on Mars or on the moon? I can't understand it. So I think the economic laws are the same on Earth and in space. And I know no system on Earth that is really successful without private property. And why should it work on Mars or on the moon or on asteroids? And so my suggestion is what I say in my book. I answer the question, who should have the right to acquire property in space? And my answer is straightforward. Those who have the financial means, who are willing to take the risk, then to go there and to develop and to use it. To give an example, if SpaceX succeeds reaching Mars and begins building permanent settlements, then ownership of land should initially go to the company. Of course, not the whole planet, but manageable area, maybe the size of Singapore. Let's say, example, the size of Singapore, because given the Mars has a surface area roughly 200 times larger than Singapore, there would be enough place for others to go there. And I think this is not a new idea in this way, but it is exactly this what happened in the history of America. There were the settlers, and about this Homesteading Act from 1862. But what a lot of people not know, the Homesteading Act was only the last thing. Before the Homesteading Act, there were a lot of settlers, they called them squatters, who went there and who took the land without any permission. Only later on, it was legalized. And I think we don't have to invent the wheel new, but we should do it the same way as it was in the history of the American West. The only difference is that there are no indigenous people. You could violate their rights, and it's definitely clear that the land that there is no ownership, that the land belongs to no one. So there is no government who can say, you're not allowed to do it because it's mine. Because, as I mentioned in the Outer Trade Space Treaty, all the nations accepted that it's forbidden for them to claim ownership of celestial bodies or land on celestial bodies. So if Elon Musk comes and says, now, this is mine, what can they do? On Mars, you have no police or jurisdiction or anything. Of course, on Earth, they can start to make them problems. This is something that can happen. But my ideas, or I will put it in a general way. What is the reason why we have no real progress in the last decades? Because people do nothing without having a real powerful reason to do it. And the reason for the first space flight was a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. So who is the better. But in the moment that they had the American flag on the moon, the wind was out of the sails at this moment. There was no reason to go on. And Werner von Braun, the mastermind behind the Apollo program, he said something very smart. He said, what we have to do now after this to make it in a way economically successful. And this is what didn't happen. And as the saying is, money makes the world go round. And without the possibility to make any profit, why should people do it? If now we have the next the next space race to the moon, because China is involved and the United States have fear that China will be the first, and then maybe it can happen for Mars again. But I think only for national prestige, it's not enough. You have to have economic motivation. And I think if a company like SpaceX, for example, if they would own a Martian land, then they can put it later on in a real estate investment trust. They can bring it to the stock exchange. Then everyone, you, me, and everyone can buy shares. And then the question, who owns Mars or who owns the moon? Everyone who buys a share. And this is a possibility, I think, for financing the whole thing. I think in the first place, the future of the space economy will be a real estate topic, because even only as a thought experiment, imagine it would be allowed to buy land on the moon or land on Mars today. Even before anyone was there, people would start to buy and to sell it because they hope they will increase, the land will increase in value. This was what happened in the American West. Maybe you know this great movie Once Upon a Time in the West, where there was this Irish farmer who bought a piece of land in the middle of the desert, and everyone said it's crazy in the desert. But he had the idea, sooner or later the train has to pass then, and then it will increase in value, and so he bought it for this reason. And I think this is a way to make it start even before people go there. I have to add something. Even today, but this is fraud, of course. There are people who trade pieces of the moon and of other celestial bodies. There's a person in the United States. His name is Hope, known as Omen, and he became millionaire by selling piece of certificates that you're owner of a piece of land on the moon. It's crazy, of course. You can't claim ownership of something where you are not there only to claim it. And I could claim, I claim ownership of the whole universe, and I sell you maybe 1,000 planets for extra price or something like that. This is crazy. But even he had success, and millions of people bought it there. And even he claims allegedly 2 former presidents of the United States. I don't know whether this is true, but a lot of famous Hollywood actors, for example, bought the certificate. So to make it clear, this is all fraud. It's a crazy idea. But what I want to make clear, if even with such a shady business, there's a huge interest in buying pieces of moon of the land, how would it be when it would really a real, legal thing? I think there would be a lot of people who would start buying shares of such a, I call it the Mars REIT or Moon REIT or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess some legal scholars would argue, well, we will cross that bridge when we get there. Right now, we don't have the technology for advanced asteroid mining, let alone settlements on the moon or on Mars. And once we have the technology, then we can worry about the legal situation. You're saying it's actually the other way around. As long as we don't have legal clarity, it will remain, the possibility will remain utopian forever, because the way to turn to make something that's right now utopian into something that's practically feasible is for people to pursue it and invest in it. And maybe that is the difference with the old American West, that there the squatters could go there and just claim the land and settle it and just start farming it, hoping that if they keep a low profile, nobody will bother them, even if the legal situation is a bit of a gray area. Whereas you can't secretly claim a part of the Mars and hope that nobody will notice. So is that a fair summary of your argument? You need the legal clarity first, and the technology will follow from there.
Yes, but to be honest, I don't believe that it will happen this way. I believe that it will happen more in the same way as it was in the history of the United States. Maybe Elon Musk will be a squatter on Mars. He will go there and then claim ownership and part, and then see what happens. I don't think that
sounds like something Elon Musk would do.
I guess so. I don't think that he would spend billions and billions and take decades and decades to go there, and in the end to say now it's yours from the government. I don't believe that he would do it. But of course, he's smart not talking about it today, because this would then there would be a lot of resistance and discussion. I don't know what are his ideas, but one thing is crystal clear. He has the plan to settle 1 million people on Mars. I have it in my book in detail. So whether it will be 1 million or there are others like Robert Suprin, I know him, this is the man who gave him the ideas. He's talking about 50,000, but whether it's 1,000 or 50,000 or a million, in the moment when they start to settle there and build a community, now he talks about building a small city on the moon. Anyway, you have to solve the question of private property, how to organize this community. There are only two ways. If you don't have any private property, then you have to start to build a hospital, to start build houses or maybe underground, whatever. But then I think you can't organize this without private property. This would be like moon socialism or Mars socialism. And as I said before, it's a crazy idea that something that didn't work anywhere on Earth will finally work on Mars or on the moon. There's no reason to assume it. So I think they have to do it, because otherwise it will not be possible for them to survive. And if they wouldn't do it, if they wouldn't introduce private ownership, how should it be possible to build a city on the moon or Mars? Because you have to be aware of something. The living conditions on Mars are much worse than any place on Earth. Even if you compare it with Antarctica, it's worse than there, because in Antarctica you have oxygen and you have gravity, and you don't have this cosmic rays and all this, and this is completely different on Mars. So the living conditions are extreme difficult, and in such a environment you need an economic system that is very, very efficient. Otherwise, it will not be possible to survive. And socialism could survive on Earth maybe for some decades, but on Mars, even not for some weeks. And so this is so I think it's absolutely necessary that they have, then they will introduce private ownership in the moment when they go there.
Right. So the case for socialism, weak on Earth, even weaker in outer space.
Yeah.
One final question. We on this channel, we normally talk about market processes in the abstract. We don't usually talk about the motives of individual market actors. But since Elon Musk is such a big figure in this sector, do you have any sense of what drives him? Why is he so obsessed with outer space? For him, it's clearly about more than money right now. It's not as if he needs the money anymore. Why is what drives him?
Especially if it comes to the Mars, I have some pages in my book about this. He has a couple of arguments. The first argument is, millions of years ago, there was this asteroid who destroyed almost all life on Earth. The dinosaurs were extended then at this time. And we know this will happen again. We don't know when. Will it happen in 1 million years, 100,000 years, or even in 1,000 years? We don't know it. And whether it will be possible, as in the movie with Bruce Willis, that someone goes to the asteroid and destroy it or something, we don't know it. But we know it's for sure that sooner or later this will happen. And what he says is the mankind exists, if you see it in a cosmic dimension, only for a few seconds right now. And it would be really bad if there would be an extension of mankind. And if we would live only on Earth, of course, this could happen for this reason or maybe other reasons. So we have to start to make mankind a multiplanetary species, to have a second home. And in our solar system, the other planets, it's not possible on Mercury or Venus and Jupiter. The only planet is Mars, where this can happen. And of course, this will take hundreds of years to settle it, or even what is the idea later, terraforming. There are a lot of books about, scientific books about terraforming today. How to, can we try to make the Mars again a little bit like the Earth? For example, you have a lot of water on Mars, a lot of water, but it's all frozen. So, but of course, there are ways to make it liquid again, and some other things. So, but this is something that will take hundreds of years. And what he says, we start as early as possible. Now, it's the first time in the history of mankind that we have technical ability to do it. And it's correct. When I wrote my book, I had a conversation with Harry Jones. He works at the NASA Ames Center. He's over 80 years, and I think he works now 60 years in the space industry. And he sent me a paper, and the result of this paper is there are no technical showstoppers on our way to Mars. It's really possible today on the tech. Of course, there are a lot of problems, but it's not impossible to solve this problem. So it's the first time in the history of mankind that it's possible. And so we should do it. This is one argument. The other is that he says progress doesn't happen automatically. We can even go back, or can have long periods of stagnation, as it happened with space flight in the last decades. And so you have to do something, and he thinks he's able to do it. And so this is his real purpose of course, to go to Mars now. It's not a business model to make money. I think this is a kind of problem. He makes money with his Starlink satellites, and he has other plans now, for example, for data centers in space. These are things that bring money today, especially this data centers and another idea. But going to Mars, by now, it's not any business model. And what I added, I think, in my book, to have a first business model, a real estate business model. Maybe this is due to the fact because I'm an historian and sociologist, but 20 years in my life, I worked in the real estate industry. So maybe I see it a little bit with the real estate lens. But I feel that, okay, sometimes if you say some things, you think maybe it's too much science fiction, or maybe you are crazy. But I give you proof why I don't think so. Because the most famous worldwide expert for space economy, his name is Matthew Reinzil from the Harvard Business School. He recommended strongly my book. He wrote, everyone should read it. It's like a standard book for this topic. I was very proud. I had also other recommendations. For example, I think you know Professor Hans-Werner Sinn in Germany. but okay, he's a good economist, but he's not a space expert. But Matthew Reinzio is the leading space expert for the space economy in the world. Or another confirmation that I think maybe I'm not completely wrong. I spoke about Robert Zubrin. Robert Zubrin is the founder of the Mars Society and the man who gave Elon Musk all his ideas. He worked close together with him. And he gave me a wonderful blurb for the book. And the blurb is, freedom will bring us space, space will bring us freedom. And Reinhard Zitelmann shows us the way how to do it. Because I think he thinks this is a realistic way to make it a real estate story. Of course, later there will be other possibilities to earn money if you settle on Mars. Robert Zubrin wrote excellent books with some chapters how to make money as a business model on Mars. But this will only happen when people started to settle there. But you should find an answer to the question how to finance this in the first place. And this is one idea with my Bring Mars to the stock exchange, make this Mars free. So this is my idea.
Right. So the short summary would be that in outer space, lots of things are very different. The atmosphere is different. Gravity works differently, but economics is not. The laws of economics are pretty much the same as here down on Earth. And I'm afraid that's all we got time for, but the book is available on Amazon. We will post a link to it. And for those who are especially interested in the economics aspect of it, Dr. Zitelmann has also written a paper for the IEA on the space economy, on space capitalism. We will post a link to that as well. Thank you for listening. And Dr. Zitelmann, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.